I think I talked to clause 2 in a general sense, and as I mentioned in my intervention on the Minister, which I was very grateful for, there is a certain irony that we have spent so much time debating these measures being put forward by government, which are intended to try and free up capacity in the wider court system, and the fact that this has been opposed by the party opposite, who then had the cheek to hold an opposition day debate on Monday, purely about the court's backlog. With regards to the point about those potential refugees who are arriving here illegally, well, they are potential refugees. Many won't be. Many will be economic migrants who, of course, are fleeing from France, a safe European country. So I just thought I'd put that on the record. I have to say the decision in 2011 the Supreme Court made, which has led to CAR JR in relation to these cases, I think was a retrograde step, and I actually think in some respects has given judicial review a bad name. And I think judicial review is an important part of the justice system, but I think it's been the influence of CAR JR, I think, has been negative, and I think it is given judicial review, which is very important for our justice system and our democracy, a bad name, and it's a retrograde step. And because the facts are, there is a debate about whether it's 0.6%, whether it's 3%, or whether it's 5% of the cases in this instance are successful. 5% is still extremely low compared with 40 or 50% for other types of judicial review, and I think that is something we need to bear in mind. And we hear, and it's 750 a year, the cost is £400,000. I raised the issue about the financial cost last week, and this was belittled actually by someone who was given evidence, and they said that it's only the amount of money with an art collection at the DCM, Department of Culture, Media and Sport costs. Of course, this isn't the key point. The key point is a wider pressure on the court system and the time of our High Court judges. That is the key point here, and it's very clear to me that the pressure that the CAR JR puts on the system, it makes it more difficult for our court system to get back on its feet after the impact that the pandemic has had on it, understandably. And I'm pleased that the practical steps that are taken in other areas of the bill to help do this. It's interesting about the first bite of the cherry, the second bite of the cherry, and the third bite of the cherry. And I haven't heard any practical reasons why what are largely immigration cases should be treated so differently from other cases by having this third bite of the cherry. And of course we hear that, well, it's only if there's one successful case, even if it's only 2% or 3%, then that's enough to justify CAR JR. Well, ultimately, if that's the argument, and that's the only argument to make, why don't we have a fourth bite of the cherry, or a fifth bite of the cherry? Because can we entirely say that the 97% that are unsuccessful in the High Court might be, if we put them to the Supreme Court, maybe there might be one or two that are successful. So would that justify endless bites of the cherry? I mean, at some point, it seems to me, the balance needs to be struck. There is a limited amount of resources, there is significant pressure on the system, and it's not unreasonable for the government, the elected government, to make a determination about what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. And to me, even if it is 5%, which is the upper limit, that is not reasonable, and it's not a justifiable pressure on the wider system. We also heard many cases on last week, Thursday, from the Shadow Minister, of cases where an individual has been successful in the High Court when it comes to CAR JR. And of course that would have contributed towards the 3% or the 5%. But I mean, we would be here for about a week if we listened to each individual case that formed the 95% or the 97%. And let's be absolutely clear that many of those individuals will be having a pernicious influence in our country, would have been a negative impact on our country, will be illegal immigrants, and frankly, the sooner we can get them out of this country, the better. So frankly, I think the government taking moves to ensure this is the case, whilst at the same time keeping in place the balance, the influence of the... Yes, I'm happy to take an intervention.
I thank the Honourable Member for taking an intervention. So he's saying the sooner we can get these people out of the country, but one of those people I spoke about at second reading was a Venezuelan man who fled after watching state actors murder a friend of his, and he knew that he was in danger because he'd witnessed it. And the first tier tribunal and the upper tribunal didn't interpret his evidence correctly according to the subsequent judge after he successfully got a judicial review. So he's one of those people, surely, that the honourable member's talking about. The sooner we can get rid of these people, because he would lose the right to have his appeal judicially reviewed if the member gets his way.
I think there's a sad reality that in any justice system in the world, I think there is sadly going to be, every now and then, a case which isn't. But can we say with complete confidence that every case that is heard in the High Court is the right outcome? Perhaps we should have, as I say, that point about the fourth and the fifth bite of the cherry. And I also think we need to reflect upon the fact that the vast majority of these cases are not a good use of our judges' time. They are not worthy of the third bite of the cherry. And what is the practical argument for why they should be treated than anybody else in the justice system who have two bites of the cherry? There is no argument for it. So I'll keep my comments fairly, I'll draw my comments to a conclusion now, only to say in a broader sense, in regards to clause 2, I welcome the government's moves here. I think the vast majority of my constituents would support what has happened here. I think that they believe in the justice system. They believe in a fair justice system where you do have the right to appeal, which we have here. That is not being changed. But they are realistic about the wider pressures on the court system and the justice system. And I think they'd see a party opposite who are doing everything they can to oppose these reasonable and justified moves to free up capacity in the court system, whilst coming up with no practical arguments about how it would do so in a way which is better than what the government is suggesting, I think is unreasonable. And I also think it is wrong to say that everyone who's going to be going down this card JR route is not abusing the system and not abusing our good generosity as a country, because many are. Thank you very much.